This podcast series is part of the mission of the New York Intellectual Property Law Association, NYIPLA, Past Presidents Committee, to preserve a snippet of the history of our association through the eyes of our past presidents, and to provide continuity for our century-old association's values and traditions for future NYIPLA leaders. I am Rob Rando, the current president of NYIPLA for the 2023-2024 term. Today, we are pleased to have with us Heather M. Schneider. She has the distinction of being the 100th president of NYIPLA during the 2022-2023 term. Welcome, Heather. And before we get started with any questions, did it occur to you that you were the 100th president, and did that have any impact one way or the other for you?
You know, it really didn't, because there were a couple of different 100-year milestones we had been talking about. There was like the 100th year of the starting of the organization, the 100th judges dinner, the 100th president, and some of them were a little different from each other. And so I think we were lucky because we got to sort of celebrate 100 a couple of times, but I was very excited to be the 100th president. And I know one of the goals we talked about is, you know, looking to the past 100 years and the pride we have in the past 100 years and looking forward to the next 100 years. And that was a theme that I picked up on when I picked Mae Jemison, the scientist and astronaut, for my speaker for the judges dinner, because she basically is working on a project to try to get, it's called the 100-Year Starship Project, to try to get humanity to the stars within the next 100 years. So it was a perfect theme for the dinner.
Absolutely, and that was an outstanding choice for keynote. So Heather, please tell us a little about who you are and where you are in your career today.
I am a partner at Wilkie Farr & Gallagher, LLP in New York City. I'm actually a lifer at Wilkie. Wilkie has a fair amount of lifers. I've been there since I was a summer associate in 2005, if you could believe it. And I graduated from law school in 2006 and went straight there. And I've been in the IP department the entire time. Wow.
There's something to be said for stability, right?
Yes, exactly.
So how did you first become aware of NYIPLA?
I'm very lucky. So Tom Maloro, another past president, I'm sure you're interviewing. Tom mentored so many people to get involved in the organization. In fact, we gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual dinner when I became president. But I was very lucky. The very first year I started at Wilkie the same time as Tom Maloro. He was coming from Kenyon and Kenyon, and I was starting fresh at Wilkie. And he started having people go to the judges dinner pretty early on. And as a first year, I don't know if I went as a first or second year, I think I got to fill in a seat, you know, maybe when a client canceled at the last minute or something like that. But I went to the patent prom, as we sort of lovingly called it, sitting in the, you know, the extra rooms we used to have at the Waldorf, like the Starlight Room, like the kind of the kiddies tables, you know.
Yeah.
So a couple years as an associate.
Satellite room.
The satellite rooms. I got to do that. And that's where I first heard of NYIPLA.
And so when did you first become involved with the association?
That would probably be around the time I was maybe a third or fourth year associate. I actually very particularly remember Tom. We were in his office talking about some career development things, and he actually suggested that I join a committee. At the time, he suggested I join the amicus briefs committee, and I did. And that was really interesting because it's an area where an associate could participate. It was a little intimidating at first because you sort of join the committee and there's all these old timers and you're sometimes a little worried to speak up. I remember the time Dave Ryan was one of the co-chairs of the amicus brief committee, and I know Dave passed away a while back, but Dave was a very outsized presence in the NYIPLA for many years and would do a lot of amicus briefs and things related to IP and antitrust law, which also interested me. So that's the first committee I got involved in.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with regard to Dave. He was amazing.
Yeah, Dave Ryan, anybody listening to this podcast who knows him, I hope they have a little remembrance of him.
a fond memory, I'm sure. So, I mean, I guess in a way you've answered it, but I'll ask you anyway, what inspired you to join? Was it, you know, based on Tom's recommendation, or were there other things, other factors?
It was a little bit a variety of things. I tend to like bar associations, conferences. I worked before law school. I was a computer programmer for Hewlett Packard. And so I always liked industry events, reading, writing, conferences. And so for me, joining a bar association was kind of right up my alley.
Well, I just learned something new that we have in common as well. Before I became an attorney, I was a computer systems analysis engineer with Sperry, which is now
Oh, that's
Lockheed.
great. That's great. I didn't know that either. And so when Tom sort of asked me to get involved, I was like, oh yeah, I love doing stuff like that. And it took a little while to find sort of the right committee. And then around maybe the time I was a mid-level associate, I got involved in the programs committee. And that's really when I think what happened is Coleman Reagan, another past president, was at Wilkie at the time. He may have been rotating off the programs committee or something and suggested I join it. I think I joined it when you and Mark Bloomberg were co-chairs.
I think that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And then what I found was all of a sudden I had an excuse to call people, clients, judges, because all of a sudden, if you're organizing a panel, you can call anyone you want. And that's what I tell young people, like, join the programs committee. You have carte blanche to call Chief Judge Gilstrap or, in-house person from IBM or somebody from, Disney, ABC, whatever, to ask them to be on a panel. It's great.
Well, it's true. It's a tremendous opportunity for connectivity and networking beyond what you would expect, working as an associate, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so I did that for several years. And then that's kind of how I made my way. I frankly became visible to people in the organization. And my big recommendation to young people, and I know we have a lot of great, very active young members right now. And I love it when they come up to me and they are not shy and they get noticed. I do notice them because that's basically what I did. I got noticed by just working really hard and organizing panels and doing things. People like you and other leaders recognize that. I eventually became co-chair of the programs committee, and then I was asked to become secretary. I was a very senior associate when I became secretary. And I remember in particular, Tony LaCicero, another past president, was very congratulatory and very happy to see that I could do that, even though I was still an associate. I think I was one of the only associates to have been on the board. And I wasn't on the ladder for the presidential until later, but I got to do a few years as a secretary while I was becoming partner at Wilkie. And that meant so much to me. That really meant a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so you've kind of described an answer to this question, but I'll ask you anyway. Did there come a time when you decided you wanted to assume leadership role, or did it evolve over time?
It was a little bit of a mix. I sort of was naturally evolving it into a little bit. And I will admit, I'm the kind of person that if I see other people not doing stuff or I see something floundering a little bit, I have a tendency to like jump in and volunteer. Sometimes I regret it a little bit, but
Yeah, right.
we joke sometimes about sometimes in committees, you end up having the same people who are kind of active over and over again. And I did sort of end up being in that group. So it was a little bit of a combination. I think I realized I was becoming more of a leader, but it was still a pleasant surprise when I got nominated to be secretary. I was surprised by that and very pleased.
Sure. And so, you talked about, being the secretary and then, as opposed to being on the presidential ladder, so to speak.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your time as president in terms of what your trajectory in the association was leading to you becoming president.
Yes. So I became president in May of 22, and which already seems like a long time ago, even though it's not at all. But in pandemic time, it's like dog years, a dog year is
Yes,
7
that's
years,
right. That's
pandemic
right.
years, like 10 years. And I was so excited because we had the annual dinner and I was able to have Judge Mary Ellen Noreika be the keynote speaker. And that meant a lot to me because I had worked cases generally against her when I was an associate. And I was telling some of the young lawyers at my table, this is a really good lesson of why you always have to be courteous and have good demeanor with everybody you work with. Because Judge Norika and I used to have disputes about all kinds of things, but we always respected each other. Because you never know when the person's going to be a judge.
That's right. That's why we call it civil litigation, right?
Exactly, exactly. You have to be civil. You never know when someone will be in that position. But that was a great. We also gave Tom Maloro a sort of lifetime achievement award because there's so many people he mentored to become officers and committee chairs and presidents. And so that was a great start. And I decided that I wanted to make my theme for the year of the life sciences industry. I've done a lot of work in that space. I had done Hatch-Waxman litigation, got involved in biosimilars and biologics litigation. And given we had just come out of a pandemic where the life sciences industry had literally saved the world, it just seemed like a perfect way to honor that industry group.
Sure. So before we get into any more specifics about your presidency, can you give us a general overview of the intellectual property landscape in terms of the issues confronting the IP community during the time that you were president?
Yeah, we had a couple of big things going on that resonate always. What the scope of patent rights should be and when they should basically be able to be taken away by the government, march-in rights and other things, and drug pricing. We had things going on as the pandemic spread. There was a lot of debate. Are there shortages of the vaccines because of people's patent rights? And as an IP lawyer in that space, to me, it was clear that the shortage was just because you couldn't make enough vaccine and there weren't enough manufacturers. That just sort of giving away people's patent rights was not the way to solve the problem. But that was a really hot topic. And then drug pricing was then, still is, and will probably always be a hot topic. And again, people tend to blame patents for drug prices, but there are so many other things, from the insurance system, the pharmaceutical system, the pharmacies, the formularies, and everything else.
Sure. And of course, the perpetual issue about patent law reform, right?
Yes, exactly. And what should you do with Section 101? What should be patent eligible? I have been writing about Section 101 in amicus briefs, articles since I was in law school, and probably will be after I retire. So, yeah.
Yeah, stay connected, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So now, can you provide maybe a general overview of the various tasks and responsibilities you were charged with during your term as president?
Yeah, so being a president, as you now know, and all the past presidents know, is a lot of work.
Yes.
And yeah, one of the best things about our organization is because we have this kind of ladder set up where people graduate into the position, you get a lot of visibility into what the duties of the president are. And so I kind of thought I knew what I would have to do, and I was still floored by the amount of stuff I had to do. And I couldn't possibly have done it without Feike Van Ryn and the other people that work for RRR, the group that helps us run all of our programs. But I was floored by how hard it is to get speakers, how many events I was invited to give, welcome remarks and things like that. Organizing President's Forum, that was a lot of work. And basically just trying to make sure that all the trains were running on time. At the same time, we were trying to increase membership, rebound from a pandemic, transition from Zoom to in-person. It was a lot.
Yeah, I recall.
Yes.
So you mentioned the theme that you had, for your year as president. Do you have any specific goals or a mission that you wanted to accomplish during your time as president? And if you did, what was or were they?
Yes, I really wanted to just showcase the life sciences industry and also educate even more people about the IP issues in that space. And I feel like that went really well. We had some, particularly we had a patent the one-day patent CLE, we had some panels that were relevant, and I invited some in-house counsel from some pharmaceutical companies that I know. That was great. Some people I know from Alvatech and Sandoz came, as well as others. We had a great event that Irina Roisman organized at her firm, where we had a lot of people from the pharmaceutical industry. And then one of the things I was most proud of was the President's Forum. Again, I had attended President's Forums or fora before and not necessarily appreciated all the work that went in. We did one on the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. I was really grateful to have a variety of people, particularly Tony LaCicero and others, help me organize that. But we brought together people from Bristol Myers Squibb, the Brookings Institution, the Association for Accessible Medicines, and we also brought somebody from Marathon Asset Management. One of the past presidents, Dorothy Oth, had suggested that because we really thought it was important to bring the sort of investing community perspective to that discussion. And so it really ended up being a great event, and I was really proud of it. And ironically, I was traveling for work at the time, and I ended up doing it in Europe. It was like midnight in my hotel room or something like that, hosting the President's Forum back in the US. But that was why it's so great that we could do everything by Zoom these days. So
That's true. No, it's absolutely true.
Mhm.
So I was going to ask you what your greatest accomplishment or proudest moment during your time as president, but it seems like you may have identified it, or was there something else?
I was very proud, but still my most proud would be the judges' dinner. My family was there, my mom and dad, my brother and his wife, my closest friends, my partner, and introducing Mae Jameson on stage. I was just so excited. She was such a fantastic role model. And also Judge Gilstrap. I cannot tell you, I mean, I feel like it's I am lucky that I am going to sort of get credit for having one of the most fun speakers of a award winner. But he did a great job, as people might remember, or he did the thing, kind of the Johnny Carson
Yeah, Ed
mind
McMahon.
reading thing. That is like definitely like for people of my generation and a little bit older, like was right on the money. And so I had nothing to do with arranging his speech, but I feel very lucky that I'll sort of get credit for awarding such a great speaker. I think his talk will go down in history right up there with Mae Jameson. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was hysterical.
Yeah,
He, he
exactly.
did such a great job. It was so entertaining.
Yeah.
So let me ask you differently. What do you think was your greatest challenge as president?
I think it was hard frankly, trying to keep the membership up. I think we did well during the pandemic. And I know, Rob, that you've really undertaken a membership drive and have already increased membership. But it was tough to see. I think during the depths of the pandemic, I was a little worried that our association, might not make it. And not just us, like bar associations in general, student groups. I mean, it just kind of felt like all of the old traditions were on the verge of collapse. Not just us, but kind of like everything. And so I was at a time where we were growing again. But I wasn't confident. I was worried, like, will people even come to the judges' dinner? And all kinds of things. And so it was a stressful year in that sense. I'm very glad that we kept and grew our membership. And then I know since you have been really focusing on it, we've been growing even more. So I'm so relieved the association will live on for another 100 years. But I was a little worried that that might not be the case. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And you did a tremendous job as we pulled out of the pandemic. And also kudos to Katie and Coleman.
Yes.
They brought us through the pandemic, and kept us viable as best we could be, in a virtual space.
Exactly. I will always be grateful to them. And I'm also very grateful to Coleman and also Rob Isaacson.
Yes.
I actually got to, while I was president, the Congress actually passed the Daniel Anderl Security Act for judges. And you may recall Judge Salas in New Jersey, her home was brutally attacked and her son was murdered and her husband shot. And it was horrible. And that happened before my tenure as president, but it's an issue we never gave up on. Coleman Reagan was involved in it. Rob Isaacson was involved in it. And finally, it was during my tenure that it passed. But I give all the credit to that for Coleman and Rob for pushing through that. But I was so happy that it was able to come to fruition during my tenure as president.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think you've identified it, but I'll ask this question anyway. Your fondest memory, but I think you've already told me that.
I think so. Yeah, definitely the judge's dinner.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. My parents never thought they'd be at a black tie event in New York with their daughter up on stage in front of a room of, when I told them it was a dinner, they had no conception of the size I was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think they knew there were that many patent lawyers because I don't think they really appreciate what I do.
Oh, that's great. So, what advice can you give our younger or newer members of NYIPLA if they aspire to assume a leadership role or to one day even maybe become president of NYIPLA?
I would say keep getting yourself out there, get your name out there. We notice, right? When I was president and I had to pick committee chairs, I remembered the people that I had interactions with. Some of the young people that I knew when they were just, junior associates are now, board members and committee chairs. So there are people paying attention. Don't think that the hard work you do goes unnoticed. It really does. People noticed the hard work that I did and sort of pulled me up in the organization. And I've tried to do the same for people coming after me. And don't be shy, because, if you don't get out there and meet people, we won't know how talented you are or how smart you are. You just kind of got to get out there. And there are a lot of people in the organization dedicated to your success and dedicated to being that helping hand for the younger generation, but we literally can't do it if we don't know who you are. Yeah.
Great advice. So what advice can you give them to get the most benefit from the membership in NYIPLA?
I think to me, the most benefit has been meeting people at my same sort of peer level. It's really nice that when I'm on a case, again, I know people, opposing counsel, co-defendants counsel, judges. I'm familiar with people from my years at NYPLA. To me, anytime, for example, you can see judges speak, you should do so, because you'll never know when you have a case in front of them, and just knowing who they are and just learning a little bit about their, personality and their worldview is so helpful. And then the more people you know in sort of your peer group, it's so much easier to litigate a case when you know the lawyers on the other side. And it doesn't mean you're not going to fight it out. Believe me, you'll fight it out. But when you know each other and respect each other from the bar association, the quality of your interactions and your own ability to advocate for your client is so much better. And so basically my advice is get to know as many people as you can through all the events we have. Yeah.
Excellent advice. Perfectly said too. So Heather, any final thoughts as we wrap up this interview?
Well, I just want to say, Rob, that I couldn't have handed the reins over to a better person. I'm very excited about your judge's dinner and your exciting keynote speaker. And it'll also be a huge relief to be there and not be charged. But I couldn't have handed the reins off to a better person. And I think this podcast you're doing with the past presidents is just an amazing idea. I can't wait to watch the other ones. And I really appreciate the time talking to you today.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I couldn't have inherited the reins from anyone better than you. So and we've had wonderful experience working together over the years, and I look forward to more of it.
Thank you very much.